That's what we're about. It's not a program. It's not a gimmick. It's a way to faithfully live out the calling that you and I, as people of faith and people who care about our friends and our neighbors, it's a way to give legs to that and to make a difference. I want to take just a minute. Some of you have heard the story about what FaithHealth NC is. If you have, then it's your job now to pretend as if you're vitally interested and never heard it before. And for those of you who haven't heard it, well, you can pretend the same thing. So I want to set our story into context, and I want to begin by saying that it's not a typo. Faith and health ought to be together. And in fact, for most of the history of humankind, the words, as they're understood, were always together. So we're trying to put that together in a powerful way. I want to go back in time a little bit to set the context, and I want to start about 2,000 years ago with what I call Faith Health 25. That would be AD, for those of you who are historians. There's one of my favorite biblical stories is depicted in this von Carlsbad etching, which is the story of the friends who took their paralyzed friend for healing to Jesus, and upon arriving at the house couldn't get in there. So did what good friends might do. They just dug a hole in the roof. And they did whatever it took to get that friend down. And even in this ancient story, about 2,000 years old, faith and health were inseparable. Skipping ahead a little bit, the year was 1854, and once again we find a great story about faith and health working together. Our story takes place in London in the summer of 1854. A terrible thing happened. It was a cholera epidemic. And in 10 days, in one area of London, 700 people died. In 10 days, 700 people died. At that rate, there wouldn't be in London very long. And into this picture jumped Dr. John Snow, who had listened to all the theories about what makes people sick and decided that it wasn't bad air or bad vibes or whatever else we thought it was, but it was in fact bad water. But nobody believed him. But he did what a good scientist and a good physician would do. He checked it out. And so he began to do his own research, and he became more and more convinced that that was exactly what was happening, that the water that the people were drinking was contaminated. The next character in this drama was a local curate, Reverend Henry Whitehead, who, interestingly enough, began his inquiry into this as a skeptic, thinking that John Snow was, well, snowed. But he did what a good pastor / scientist might do, is he went calling on all of his parish members. And he began to ask them questions and to follow what they did, and perhaps to his unhappiness, discovered that his neighbor was right. His validation of John Snow's theory caused him to actually take the handle off of this water pump on Broad Street, where the water had become contaminated with cholera from a nearly non-existent sewer system, if it could be called that. Faith and health came together, literally, to save the city. Jumping ahead to 1923, you heard Gary talk a few minutes ago about the vision of North Carolina Baptist back turn of last century to extend God's healing ministry through building a hospital. And in case you're wondering, that was it. 30 beds of luxury. Well, maybe not. It actually looks like a prison to me, but what do I know? That's the original photo from Old Main, as it was called. And it was a proud accomplishment of Baptist churches, like some of the ones you see here, were actually built about this time. But the problem was that when they finished the hospital, guess what? They were out of money. Well, this is a familiar story for hospitals. Into the breach stepped, once again, people of faith. In this case, the women of those Baptist churches, who took it upon themselves to fix the problem. And so they got out. Did they have sewing machines in 1923? I'm not sure. But in any case, let's assume they did. But those ladies made all the curtains. They made the bed linens. And they furnished every room in this hospital so the patients would have a comfortable place to go when they were sick. The other interesting thing about this, another photo I found, is this one right here, when, not a few years after that, when a nursing school began at the hospital. Now, the nurses' uniforms, some of you will be old enough to remember those, but what's remarkable about this picture is that one small detail that you might overlook, these nurses are holding a Moravian candle. I love it as a symbol and a reminder that in 1923, faith and health were inseparable. And so now it is 2013, nearly 14. And you and I have the opportunity and the responsibility to help put back together what has been gradually moving apart since about 1924, thereabout. And let's do this thing we call FaithHealth NC. And at the heart of it is a mission of compassion. We care because God cares for us. In simplest terms, FaithHealth NC is about creating a chain of compassion with people who provide health care, whether they're doctors or nurses or hospitals or clinics or food pantries or any of those people who care and contribute to the health of a community. And adding in what has been a missing element, this huge army of compassion found in our faith communities, the congregations across this county and beyond. Combining them with the 80 and perhaps even more community resources that we identified in our asset mapping experience here. And when we put those together, we become the David who can slay Goliath. Another way to think about it is we're creating a network of caring. Now it turns out, not terribly surprising, that majority of our lives, for most of us thankfully, is spent not in the hospital but out of the hospital. That's where we get sick or where we get better and where the determinants for our health go up and down. So what if we had a mechanism and a whole cadre of people who looked after each other to help make what happened in the community the center of our health care? That's what a network of caring can do. The model we're working off of is one that Gary began back in Memphis a few years ago, but we've already kind of left the Memphis map. But essentially, this is what we're trying to create, and we want you to be a part of. We'll start over here at this end. One of the keys to this is the resources that our hospital and others, and I was just telling, since I've been here this afternoon, I've had emails from 3 other hospital systems across the country wanting to know, how do we do this? So the hospitals invest with their resources and personnel to create what we've called healthcare liaisons, people whose main job it is to connect people when they're coming into or out of the hospital. Not while they're in it so much, but with the resources they need to lead healthy lives and to make full recovery so that they don't have to come back. Congregations play another key role in this because you are God's army of compassion, full of what we call caregivers. Who's a caregiver? Well, look to your right and to your left. You've just seen one. They might be a nurse, they might be a retired doctor, they might be a factory worker, they might be a farmer, they might be a high school student. All of us have the opportunity to be a caregiver And one of the resources we bring to bear is to help provide training and support and encouragement so that that caregiving gets easier. And when we do that, we have a chance to make a difference in the community. Now, if you're part of a faith community here in Wilkes County, which I suspect most of you are, you probably have some mechanism already where you look after people who are sick. Somebody calls your pastor or calls you up and says, "Oh, Aunt Martha's sick. Can you somebody go see her in the hospital?" And it all works really well. But here's the cold and other startling truth, is that every day that passes, more and more of our own family members and our neighbors are not part of any faith community. And when the time comes for them, when they need help, they quite likely may have no one to turn to. My own family, and I've been in some form of ministry, either inside a church or inside a hospital or somewhere else for 30 years. I've never lived in a city, and my children have never lived in a place, or my wife, where there was a single family member. So when I got sick a few years ago from a virus that killed my left ear and gave me bionic powers to read your mind, it was my church family in Boone who helped us through it. We have to help each other. And our neighbors, and particularly those who aren't even in our churches, they need us most of all sometimes. In Memphis, where we said this whole started, they had dramatic results. You can read more about this on our website and other places, so I won't give you details, except just a couple to say that it actually helped people do what, ironically, hospitals want to happen now, which is to stay out. Isn't that odd? What a world we live in. The goal now is to keep you out of the hospital. Being part of this network that they created in Memphis dramatically impacted life expectancy. It dramatically impacted quality of life. And in fact, it made bold steps toward creating what we like to think of as God's beloved community. We talked with churches in Memphis and we asked them, what happened to you as you participated in this? And the clergy that we talked to reported equally powerful and dramatic results. As this thing grew, they found that in their congregations there was new energy and focus, new sense of commitment, a new energy for ministry and caring that some of them had lost long ago, and this helped them to regain. There are really four kind of overall principles that I want to introduce you to quickly. They're on this banner that you perhaps have seen as you got your food here, or perhaps as you came in the front door. You can look at it when you go out. But there are four keys that this network of caring can play a huge role in. One you've already heard alluded to tonight, and that is getting people to the right door. If you're broken or bleeding or in a real emergency, then please go to the emergency room. But most of the emergency room visits now are not what you and I, ordinary people, would think of as emergencies. It's a only stop resort for people who don't have anywhere else to go. And it's a very expensive enterprise. And it takes its toll on health and well-being of not just the health providers, but of people who are sick. So with people who knew and care and could help them, we might be able to get them to a better door at a time when they could get better care at the right time and never have to show up in a crisis in an emergency room. Right time, you already heard Heather allude to as well. When we don't have money and resources, we put off doing the things we should do. I'm a male, I know about this. A few weeks ago, I casually reached down and pulled up a weed in my yard. I know my wife was shocked too, but I did. And I got a splinter, which I pulled out and didn't think much of it. Certainly didn't need to go to the doctor. A couple of days later, my finger was the size of, a couple of fingers. But I was not deterred. No problem, I thought. I can handle this. 30 days later, I'm in surgery for a finger. It's embarrassing. I didn't go at the right time, even though I could have. I wasn't smart enough to do that. I needed someone to help. We need to help people be ready to get the help they need. You've heard Heather talk already about some of the issues around medications, but My mother's 90, so it's hard for her to understand what she's supposed to do, even if she does hear it once. All of us need help and need the information that we can give to the doctors and others who are caring for us so they can take care of us properly. A lot of times we show up and we can't provide that. So it delays it and makes it more difficult all the way around. And finally, the one thing that we can do best of all, it makes a huge difference in a time of illness not to be alone. Even if you don't know even how to change a Band-Aid, we know how to be with someone who needs us. We know how to hold a hand. We know how to say a prayer. In Lexington, where we've been trying this model out and learning from it, the single biggest category of request we've had from people who ask for assistance, would you like to know what it is? Prayer. And it was completely sincere. They had no one to pray for them. What we're inviting you to do is to care in a simple way. There's no cost, there's no gimmick to it. It requires your willingness to do it and our ability to work together to learn and support each other to make it happen. We know that there are caregivers potentially in your congregation right now, people who could do some of these kinds of things, who could help someone get to the doctor, or how about get from the driveway into their house. We learned recently that an older couple from our hospital that were discharged got home and discovered that they weren't able to get out of their car and spent the night in their driveway. All they needed was a friend to help them travel that last 10 yards. They didn't have family, and they didn't have anyone. A huge need for a lot of people, we've learned from our housekeepers as our new allies in this process, is that patients tell them, close the door. I don't want to tell anybody, but there's no food at my house, and I'm going home tomorrow. What should I do? They turned off my electricity last week. It's freezing in my house, and they're going to discharge me tomorrow. What should I do? Well, hospitals aren't set up to fix that until now. And with your help, working with those who care, we now know that it is absolutely important that we don't send a patient home to a cold house. And we want to work with everybody else in the community to see that that doesn't happen. And that makes us all healthier and better. You don't have to have a high level of training. What you do have to have is a compassionate heart. And we'll help you do the rest. We're not asking anyone to do anything that probably you're not already doing. We just want to help you do it better. We want to create an army of caring people to make a difference across this community and beyond. So here's some simple ways you can be involved, because you all look a lot like David to me tonight, and I can see a slingshot in a lot of your back pockets. So one of the things you can do is encourage your congregation to join this movement. Like I said, there's no cost. We call it a covenant relationship because everybody in the covenant brings something to it. And we're going to give you a copy of that to look at in just a few minutes to take home with you. But we hope your congregation, every one of you representing this room, will become part of this great movement. We hope that you'll have some volunteers in your church that want to be caregivers. And we'll come to Wilkes County and help train them and support them to make it happen. No cost to you. We want them to be able to do this well. We've already begun to identify needs and assets in the community. We want to help you connect those up so that all of these 80 somewhat disconnected resources can be put together in a new, powerful way to make a difference in people's lives. Because if we can connect what we do have, it doesn't matter so much what we don't have. Like the multiplication of loaves and fishes, we can multiply the power of love and compassion to make a tremendous difference in the lives of people who need us most. My colleagues are passing out some white envelopes. There's no money in them, in case you're wondering. But there is a lot of information in there, one of which is a covenant that I invite you to take home, think about, read. It describes how you can be a part of it, whether you're a faith community or whether you're a community organization. We want you to contribute your best to this so that when we put it together, we have something more than just the sum of the parts. Now, as Nelson mentioned as we began tonight, some of us have been involved in this process now for several months, and we actually have several that have made the decision already to sign and become covenant partners with this FaithHealth NC movement. And I want to invite my friend Nelson, wherever he is, somewhere in here, to come and tell us how to do this, and we're going to invite them up to actually sign the covenant up here with us.